What's the most horrifying how do you not know how to do this moment you've experienced with another person whilst adulting? A friend who was pushing 40 had never paid a bill before. She had gone from living with her parents to living in a dorm to living with her parents again until she got married. Then she got divorced and was living on her own for the first time. Got a text from her asking if my power was out too. Then she realized it was just her. Her excuse was she never paid attention to the bills because she thought they were receipts and that the cost was included in her rent. Her water was cut off a couple weeks later and we had to talk about that too. I'm afraid this is about to happen to my brother-in-law's Bill's soon-to-be wife. Not that they'll get divorced, but she's 33 and has never lived on her own. She's just lived with her parents her entire life, including the short time she was in college. She and my Bill are planning to marry and move her into his place next year. They got engaged earlier this year. For their engagement, she picked out a $15,000 ring and couldn't wrap her head around why Bill freaked out about it. She genuinely had no concept of how much money that is, nor any concept of what an insurance policy for jewelry looks like, or why it would be necessary for such a purchase. Her current plans for the wedding include 450 guests, and she can't understand why that's not affordable. Blows me away. Edit. A bunch of people keep asking if she's my sister lol. No, she's not. I've only met her a handful of times because she and my Bill, brother-in-law, live about 8 hours away. My Bill is my husband's brother. Edit #2. I was informed that I should have explained what Bill meant from the beginning. My apologies to anyone who was confused. Every few weeks I catch my roommate trying to put his metal tea strainer in the microwave. This is in spite of the fact that our first week living in this apartment, he destroyed the microwave and had to pay for a new one because he put a metal tea strainer in the microwave. You could have left it at him making tea in the microwave. P.S. This blew up. I'm proud that my first silver is on a comment about respecting British culture. I have many great stories about my former college roommate. Two of my favorites are, she wanted to make pasta. She put a pot on the stove and poured the noodles in. No water in the pot. Turned on the stove. After a while she asked me how come these aren't getting soft like when my mom makes them. She made brownies from a box. The box instructions say grease the bottom of an 8x8 pan before pouring in the brownie batter. You betcha this bitch picked up the 8x8 pan, flipped it over, greased the bottom of it, and then flipped it back over and poured in the brownie batter. The brownie pan one made me laugh out loud in the bathroom. The consequence about it, A+ material. My wife's entire family not grasping that you need to put water in a steam iron. I'm a seamstress, but I purposefully don't put water in a domestic iron because they all eventually leak. I just use a separate spray bottle. Industrial/gravity irons are way better anyways. Wish I had one at home. My best friend was sleeping with a new guy. She said she wasn't sure of his sexual history, but she was on the pill to prevent STDs. I was like Edit. Okay, my inbox is blowing up. She's a smart girl from a very traditional Chinese family. They never discussed sex or anything, and if I recall she actually didn't attend health club with us due to her parents opting out. I taught her everything she knows. I even had to teach her about lube and blowjobs, so hey, she's happily married now and no, she doesn't have crazy STDs. My gay guy friend once got unstandard from oral. Did you know you can get unstandard from oral? Yeah, they teach us that every time we get tested for HIV. Haven't you been tested? Dumbo was 29. Had a guy constantly asking what time JT is. By the 6th time I said bro, there is a clock right there. He said I don't know how to read it. Grown man. Couple weeks later on Facebook someone shared a picture of cursive writing. He made fun of the people who couldn't read it. I posted a picture of a clock and said what time does this say? He blocked me. When I taught students how to tell time in French, I found out many didn't know how to tell time at all. My friend in college once lamented, "Ugh, I have to pee, and I just put a tampon in like 5 minutes ago. I hate having to pull them out dry. Also it's such a waste." Her mother taught her that there is only one hole down there, and peeing with a tampon in is not possible. It will duck up your bladder. Took a lot of me showing articles and diagrams and answering questions to convince her there are, indeed, 2 holes. She peed while the tampon was still in and called her mother in utter shock to share the good news. Oh dear God. I had a roommate at university. His cooking method was put baked beans in a Tupperware, seal the lid, turn on microwave. When lid pops and explodes beans everywhere, they're cooked. Edit well, this kinda blew up way more than I expected. So in light of that, I'll share another story of his cooking methods. One time I came home to find the oven on and smoking a bit. Opened the door to find what was an entire lasagne bubbling on the bottom of the oven. He bought himself a frozen lasagna. Step 1, remove outer packaging. Step 2, place on middle tray of preheated oven. He literally thought that outer packaging was anything outside of the lasagne, so he tore away that shell that the lasagne cooks in and placed it straight on the rack. So as it defrosted, it just fell through the rack and all over the oven. And you can guarantee he'd refuse to clean the microwave too. I remember when I first started dating my now husband, I was hanging out at his apartment waiting for him to get out of work. His place was a bit messy, so I decided I'd tidy up for him a bit. Fast forward to the next morning, and he comes in a little shocked. Why would you load the dishwasher like that? I had never had a dishwasher before in my life. Mayo. We're talking cups facing up, bigger pans shoved in, the whole 9 yards. Thank God he stuck with me, lol. I never had a dishwasher until I moved in with my husband. Hez had one his whole life, but his mom loaded it most of the time. Wanting to do it right, I read the manual. Consequently, Hez terrible at loading the dishwasher, and it's become my job, while Hez in charge of unloading it. I take a weird sort of pleasure in getting the most efficient placement possible. 19-year dude, how do you cook a fried egg? Gave him instructions and left him to it. Came back a while later to ask how it went. Fine in the end, but it took a few attempts because the yolk kept breaking. What do you mean, kept breaking? Well, I kept throwing them away because I thought breaking the yolk made it poisonous. Once again, he was 19 years old. Reminds me of when I was dating a 19-year dude. I explained that eating raw nuts is healthy, so he bought a bag of peanuts. He complained 2 days later that he was going to stop eating them because they upset his stomach, so I got a free bag of peanuts. Yay. He was stunned when he saw me shelling them and eating the nut because he was eating them shell and all for 2 days. Surprisingly did not end well, but I got a lot of terrible sex and dumber stories out of it. I got one. I work as an EMT for a private company, so we mostly deal with nursing homes and the elderly. One day when I was about 6 to 8 months in, I got a partner who was in my orientation class. He was a little older than me at the time, like mid-20s, but he seemed a little childish. Maybe he's just sheltered, I think to myself. Anyways, we got a patient I've had a few times before. She was a sweet little old lady with COPD and CHF living at a nice TED living. Call was for pneumonia. She's prone to this stuff, so it wasn't a huge deal. Slap her on oxygen and keep her sitting up till we get to the hospital. The first red flag though was this kid didn't know anything. He didn't know how to take a blood pressure. He couldn't find the medical history or medication on the paperwork, which is clearly labeled. He didn't even push the stretcher, just walked next to it with a hand on it. When I asked him about all that, he said my partners usually do that for me. So, I put her on an oxygen mask and sit her all the way up, mildly agitated. I tell myself it's just one shift with this kid. He's in the back with her, and I tell him to just switch the oxygen from the bag, which is a small tank, to the main tank, which is huge, because with the amount of oxygen we are giving her, the bag will run out not even halfway before the hospital. It's about 25 minutes, which normally wouldn't be a huge deal. But when we pull up to the hospital, and I open the back doors, I'm ducking shook. The oxygen mask isn't inflated, meaning she isn't getting oxygen. She's pale as chiz. I can literally see her accessory muscles moving, struggling to breathe. And this kid was sitting behind her, with a clueless half smile on his face, looks at me, and says the main tank is broken, so I left her on the bag. This woman, who needs oxygen without pneumonia, was barely breathing for at least 15 minutes. And this ducking idiot didn't even check. We take her into the hospital. I ask him to find an oxygen tank, while explain to this woman's daughter what happened. He says he doesn't know where to look. I ducking find it and told him to talk to the daughter. When it's all said and done, I checked to see what's broken. He didn't turn on the tank. TL. Dr. EMT partner nearly kills a patient because he didn't know he had to open the oxygen tank to get oxygen to come out. Please tell me he's not an EMT anymore. This is terrifying. Roommate in college was 22, had lived in an apartment for 3 years prior to moving in together. Legitimately did not know how to remove a trash bag from a trash can. We had the simplest trash can possible, had never turned on an oven before, and, my favorite, complained one day that their bathroom was always sopping wet every time they showered. Finally realized that they never put up a shower curtain. They learned quickly and became a pretty good cook by the time I moved out, but man, their parents really never prepared them for living alone. Like, I know it's technically the parents' fault in these instances, but at a certain age surely the ability to Google literally anything places the blame squarely on the individual's shoulders. Worked at an on-campus store that sold a lot of essentials for students living at dorms. I had one girl ask me what laundry detergent was because she never did laundry. She asked if I could help her do her laundry, but I declined as I couldn't leave the register, which of course she was mad about. Sorry, I have to actually do my job, lady. In a weird way I'm jealous of those people. I've done crap like that since I was physically able to, and I can honestly say they haven't missed much. I appreciate how, hopefully, it's shaped me into a better person, but come on, it's boring AF. More of a how do you not know to not do this. First year at uni, a girl in my halls is microwaving some food and left it in the metal foil container. It took 3 fire engines to put out the fire, and we had to have a new kitchen installed. Not to mention, this was at like 3 AM, and I had an exam the next day. I was not impressed. Edit. Okay. Apparently not knowing microwave safety is pretty common. So do people not study basic physics anymore? My faith in humanity wanes daily. I was not impressed, is the thing that identified this to me as a fellow British person post. I can literally hear you saying it, inflections and everything. My ex and I were cooking together, and one of the pans got too hot, and we had a minor grease fire. She grabbed a bag of flour. As tempted as I was to slap it out of her hands, I didn't want to aerate a bunch of flour next to a grease fire, so I grabbed it with both hands and forced it, and her, because she wouldn't let go, over to the countertop, and then dropped the lid on the pan. I asked her what her logic was, and she said, well, you're supposed to put baking soda on a grease fire and not water, right? Yes. Why did you try to use flour? What's the difference? They're both white powder. Edit. Scribble also wow. This blew up. Close bracket. Jesus, that's even worse than water. She almost made a bomb. Our kitchen sink has 1 tap. 2 things. Don't know what they're actually called. For hot and cold. I walked into the kitchen and my partner kept switching between hot and cold. Asked him why. Well, the hot gets too hot, so I run the cold instead for a bit. He didn't know you could run the hot and cold water at the same time. 2 things knobs. I had a friend who I noticed took Mucinex a lot. I've used it occasionally when I've been congested, but it seemed abnormal how often I saw him taking it. I finally asked him why he was taking it one time because he didn't seem sick at all, and he looked puzzled and said, well, I think I'm getting sick. I pressed further and he said, because it's an expectorant. It turns out he thought you take an expectorant when you are expecting to get sick. That's actually pronounced analgesic, not analgesic. Sir, the pills go in your mouth. This is going to sound weird, but manage a budget. Or just in general being money smart. One of my old roommates was really bright academically, but he was terrible with money. Each semester he would start off with a pile of cash from his parents and roughly blow through it after about 2 months. I first noticed it with his dining dollars on campus. Every day it seemed like he would buy the most expensive sushi option on campus every day. We are talking maybe $18.00, which isn't terrible if it's once in a while, but this was every day. It's also college dining hall sushi, so the quality was also just okay without even considering the money spent. Of course, around midterms when his dining dollars would run out and he'd sort of panic and whine that he couldn't afford anything. But what was so strange is that when he would start to low, he sort of laugh about not knowing any way we could avoid going broke while continuing to buy the most expensive option. But he'd also get really defensive when people wanted to talk to him about this. Eventually when he moved off campus it was the same thing. For the first 2 months he'd feast. He'd get delivery constantly, ordering just way too much food, and of course he'd never share it. But then once he'd nearly run out of cash, he'd buy like an emergency 50 pack of hot dogs and only eat that for the rest of the semester, while telling everyone else that they were lucky they had money to spend, and how not everyone had it so easy when it comes to money. He'd never directly say it, but there were always a lot of implied insults. Do you know if he had ever had a job? My girlfriend, now wife, put a pan of oil on too high of heat and it hit the flash point and caught fire. She freaked out and went to get a large thing of water and I stopped her and tossed the pan lid on top until the flames went out. Then she asked me why I stopped her. I was very thankful that I was there the first time she had a grease fire. Not only could she have hurt herself, but it was in a college dorm and the whole friggin' place could have gone up. I had a grease fire not long ago. I was cooking away and the pan went alight. I was holding the pan handle. I didn't know where the lid was. I casually called in my wife. No response. Called again. She replied she was just finishing something. I was still holding a pan of fire before casually walking past her through the front door and placed it on the drive. In my head it felt like minutes had passed, but it was probably only a few seconds and my wife mocks me for how calm I was carrying a pan of fire casually through the house. In the late 90s, had a coworker who complained about her PC being slow. Took a look and the hard drive was full. Largest folder was her recycle bin. She had never ever emptied it in years of use. I emptied recycle, cleared temp folder and PC started working fine. She was happy until her big Excel tracking sheet was gone. Oh no. She did not know where it was on File Explorer, so I asked her to show me how she opened it. She goes to the little storage container on her desktop, named Recycle Bin, and it was normally at the top, but now it's gone. No backup. Oops. She cried to management that I destroyed her computer. Manager laughed when I told her the truth. Edit. If you've never seen what Windows 95 looks like, net. That's wow. How was she using Excel but didn't know what the recycle bin was? Excel isn't exactly basic knowledge. Not sure if this counts, but when I took a food safe course someone asked if they could wash a turkey with dish soap. He failed the course. But you can wash a turkey with dish soap, just be careful not to get it in their eyes, because it really stings. One of roommates in college would go through plastic spatulas like crazy. She'd melt them and wouldn't say anything about it. She'd only tell me when I'd go to use it and wonder why it was messed up. She'd always say it was due to the spatula being made of cheap plastic. No. I finally caught her one day. She'd be cooking something and would walk away leaving the plastic spatula in the pan while it was still on. Edit. Fixed some spelling. Also I really did not expect this to blow up. Funny that so many people can relate. For those asking, yes I know there are heat resistant, wooden, and metal spatulas. Remember this was in college though, so I went to Walmart and just bought the cheapest non-stick pan and utensil sets I could find. Honestly I like them well enough, and they fit my purposes. I never melted a spatula because I don't leave my utensils sitting in a hot pan. I also wouldn't allow my roommate to buy a metal spatula since that would mess up the Teflon. I have stopped myself from doing that many a time because their parents used to leave metal spatulas in the pan and it never occurred to them that maybe, just maybe, plastic is a little easier to melt than metal. Friend from college tried making burrito bowls for dinner and complained that some of the onions were weirdly chewy. She didn't know onions need to be peeled. She asked me if not greasing the pan when making banana bread was okay because she didn't have anything to grease it with. She had canola oil, olive oil, and butter. She thought you could only use Pam, which I informed her was just sprayable oil. She won't cook raw meat because it's gross and she doesn't know how to tell if it's cooked well enough to not get sick. I taught her how to make tea, how to mop, how to do laundry, how to make scrambled eggs. She has the type of mom that does all the cooking and cleaning. but I don't understand why she wouldn't have tried to par that to her daughter. She has the type of mom that does all the cooking and cleaning, but I don't understand why she wouldn't have tried to par that to her daughter. That's exactly why mom always did everything and never realized her little baby would need life skills someday. Infantilizing. That or mom never wanted to relinquish control of any household tasks because kids tend to be bad at stuff while they're learning. I have a couple. I once had my ex's parents coming over and needed some help cleaning the house up to get ready for their arrival. I asked my ex to clean the bathroom for me whilst I cleaned the kitchen and left him to it. I went in about a half an hour later and the bathroom was somehow dirtier, but the ex was sitting on the couch chilling. When I asked him why he hadn't cleaned the bathroom, he looked at me all confused and said he had. I asked him to come in and pointed out all the soap scum everywhere and how it was clearly not clean. He reiterated that he'd cleaned it. I asked him to show me how. He proceeded to pick up a bar of soap, lather up his hands real good, and just rub everything. He didn't even rinse it after. Just rubbed everything with soapy hands. And couldn't understand why I was staring at him open-mouthed. Same guy. A few months later, I asked him to mash some potatoes at boiled whilst I plated up dinner. He very literally did so, without draining out the water. Again, he didn't think what he'd done was in any way wrong, despite the weird texture and look of the potatoes. Why yes, I'm also a fellow human being, like yourself, and native to your planet. Your ex, probably. When my friend bought a house a month into home ownership, she asked me, very pissed off, when the city was coming to cut her lawn, because it's starting to look like weeds. It was awkward when I had to explain that she needs to cut her own lawn or hire someone. If she waited long enough, the city may have come and cut it for her. Also a citation and a bill. My ex-best friend had told me that she had needed to buy another new vacuum cleaner, the third that month. I asked her what was wrong with it, and she said it's not picking things up anymore. So I asked if she had dumped out the container. She didn't know that was a thing. You don't have the new Dyson wormhole model? I guess we were still in high school, but we were 18. Me and my buddy Ferris were just getting into going to the gym. We went with Ferris' friend Tom. After working out in the changing room during some small talk, I saw Tom putting on a shirt. Tom put the shirt over his head, but didn't put his arms through the sleeves. He managed to pull the shirt over his torso so that it was adequately on before wiggling all about and bending his arms in odd ways to get them into the sleeves. I didn't take much notice to it the first few times, but after a few months it was apparent he did this every single time. Tom didn't know how to put on a shirt, at least efficiently. Eventually we asked Tom why he put his shirt on like that, and he said something along the lines of, wait, what? Don't I do it the same way you guys do? I guess he had never really thought about it before then. Edit. Grammar. I know a lot of guys that do this. I think it's more of a societal split than you realize. Not sure if I'd call it horrifying, but pretty ridiculous, nonetheless. It's about me. I just moved into my first home in February of this year. I live alone and am single. Earlier this month I mowed my lawn for the first time. I have never mowed a lawn before, but I'm thinking, how hard can it be? The answer, not hard at all. Prior to that, I had roped my brother into coming over and doing it for me, but this time I figured I need to actually learn. The lawnmower is an old push mower of my dad's that he had brought over about a month ago, and he quickly gave me the rundown on how to use it, but I was half paying attention. Plus, it's a lawnmower. So anyway, I go to start it up. Takes me at least 10 tries of pulling the cord as hard as I can with no luck until finally it fires up. I then proceed to begin mowing, and I know this thing is self-propelling. It says so right on it, but I cannot, for the life of me, figure out why it's so hard to push. The wheels aren't locked or anything, so I just figure it's a combination of me not having much upper body strength and my lawn having a lot of uneven spots/divots that prevented the mower from moving smoothly. I finally finish, sweating my ass off, like I had just finished seriously working out. My yard is very small. Even I finished the front and back in about a half hour 40 minutes. Upon reflection, I'm still not convinced that the mower was self-propelling. I mean, I know I'm not strong, and am somewhat petite, but still. So I'm sharing this story with friends and co-workers like WTF did I do wrong? And they're all asking me about this lever, and I'm like yeah, obviously I had to hold the lever down, or the motor kills. Well, turns out there's a second lever that you have to squeeze in order to propel the lawnmower. I manually pushed that for around my whole yard, divots, hills and all, ended up with a blister on my thumb and sweating profusely through my shirt. Not to mention a few times I stopped it and had to restart it. I pulled the cord literally at least 20 times to get it to start again. I was waiting for one of my neighbors to come over and ask me if I needed help. The struggle was that obvious. I also learned about the little button that you push a few times to make starting easier. So yeah, mode today, and let's just say that things went significantly better than last time. Growing up, my dad or brother would mow, and in college up until now, I have always lived in apartments or duplexes, nothing that requires residents to do any lawn care. So, at the age of 32, I have finally learned to use a lawnmower. Sounds to me like you have never had to deal with a small gasoline engine before, which is okay, since they seem to be on the way out nowadays. The little button you press to make starting easier is called a priming bulb, and it basically pumps gas into the system so it's ready to go. You are lucky you didn't have to mess with the choke, though who knows, you might have, which would explain why it kept dying. In reading this to make sure I don't end up on it, I never got taught how to do chis as a kid, and this thread has convinced me that somehow I picked it all up via osmosis anyway. What a relief. Had to ask my roommate to please wash his hands after touching raw chicken. He was cool to just go about his day before I asked. He thought I was being a wacko neat freak. Same guy also thought his sheets wouldn't fit in the washing machine, so he just never washed them. When I asked him please not drop silverware down the garbage disposal and leave it, he said I had too many house rules. I'm forever disturbed by the amount of people who don't seem to have a problem with touching raw chicken and not washing their hands afterwards. My mom and I moved in with my grandparents when I was 10 years old. You know, old enough to have learned how to do some basic chores, and certainly old enough to be taught more. Unfortunately, my grandmother, God bless her, was not only terrified of fire, her mother had a problem with accidentally setting things on fire, but she was also a neat freak that insisted on doing everything herself, so it was done right. My mom married my step-dad when I was 14 years old, and we moved into a house together as a family. He was horrified to learn that, at nearly 15 years old, I did not know how to wash and dry my own clothes, iron, load a dishwasher, or even use the stove. I could use the oven, because I baked with my other grandmother when I visited, but I had never used the stovetop. There are many more things he had to teach me, but those were the things that really had him worried about my ability to care for myself as an adult. It wasn't that my grandmother didn't want me to be able to care for myself. Her fears were just so intense that she didn't think about how not knowing these basic skills would affect me later in life. I'm forever grateful to my dad for being the dad I needed, because God knows the biological one couldn't be bothered. Mom couldn't overrule her own mother when we lived with her, and by the time she married dad she was sleeping at the hospital 5 nights a week because her schedule was so insane. I don't even want to think about who I would be if I hadn't had him to teach me, but I'm pretty sure I would have had to live off of chocolate chip cookies, brownies, and takeout through my 20s if it weren't for him. I probably would have smelled pretty bad from the lack of clean clothes too. Hero stepdad is a hero. I was a drill sergeant in the US Army. The first time you have to show an adult man how to shave is a little shocking. The worst one was the 24-year-old male that didn't know how to tie his boots. He had gotten through a reception and pickup day by tightly lacing his boots and tucking the laces in. As they would loosen up throughout the day, he would just pull them tight again. The first Sunday I noticed his boots were barely staying on as he was marching back from dinner. I asked him what was wrong with them, as it's common for privates to have the wrong size boots when they get to us. He didn't know how to tie them at all. Not a single knot. I spent an hour showing him how I tie my boots and different techniques if he gets hot spots or blisters. Then I egged his bunkmate the task of making sure they were tied correctly when he left the bay. I kind of understood it. He came from a super poor neighborhood, single mom that worked all the time. He didn't have a lot of positive influences before joining the army. I was a little worried about his comprehension skills, since basic rifle marksmanship is kind of intense and takes some focus, but he did well. I was very happy that on family day he had his low quarters tied and was proud that he had learned so much. Kudos to you for taking the time to help him grow up. I have 3 sons who are active in a lot of team sports and band, etc. They brought home a lot of kids, some of whom ended up staying with us for extended periods. Not surprisingly, those who came from difficult circumstances often had no exposure to things we considered commonplace, using and washing real dishes, brushing teeth, bandaging a cut. One sweet kiddo had never had sleeping clothes/PJs. More than one left us with a new toiletry kit and full duffel bag. Broke my heart, but so glad we had the opportunity to share with and learn from them all, and it definitely helped my kids grow up to be kinder guys. My wonderful, selfless, beautiful younger brother asked me how to make ice last year. He's 24. Oh my days, this one was the first one in a while that made me nearly spit out my drink. Oh, I have a really funny one. I hope it doesn't get buried. Years ago, I bought a friend an electric kettle as a gift. Her boyfriend, who I'm still friends with and who parred along this story, came home one night to find her running out the front door of their apartment with the flaming kettle, and she threw it into the street. She was screaming about how it was a piece of junk because when she put it on the stove over a flame, it caught fire and started to melt. He was laughing uncontrollably when he asked, "What did you think the cord was for?" They broke up soon after. As someone from a country where kettles are basically default household items, this is painful. I had to explain and show to my older brother that you can and should clean your Phillips beard trimmer from inside the little bits as well. We both got the same exact model as a gift on Christmas, I think, and it turns out he hadn't opened up and cleaned the little rotary bits the entire time he had it. Years, literally years, at least 5, and was complaining how it's very slow and probably needs to be replaced with a new one. I thought that's weird. Mine is around the same age and is still perfectly fine. So I turn it on and it makes this very gritty sound like the machine is so slow as if it's dying and stuff even though it's fully charged. I open it up and goddamn the little rotary blades were so clogged up with years old dust and hairs it was a miracle the thing was still working at all. Turns out he didn't even know you can open them. I cleaned it all nice and clean and the thing started working good again, as much as it can. Afterwards, read instructions please before you disregard something as broken, like goddamn. Edit. Turns out it's not a beard trimmer, but dry shaver instead. If that matters to anyone. Oh brother. Guess we know which one got the brains. I had to teach my friend how to tie his shoes. He either wore Velcro or tucked the laces into the shoe up until that point. HPLZ. Back in 06 or 07, was working selling a software licensing product to software vendors. I was working with a 50-something Californian lady, I'm from the UK, who was handling some of the incoming inquiries through our website. One day she asks, "Hey, we had a lead today from a company in Egypt. What should I do with it?" I said, "Well, follow it up of course." "Why would you ask?" She goes, "Because they're Arabs, and we're at war with the Arabs, aren't we? FML. I then had to give her an education on the Middle East. If only the Middle East and Central Asian situation was that easy. I worked with a woman who forgot how to cough. She was in her 30s and rarely got sick, and when she came down with a bad cold one winter, she just kept making these pathetic little squeaking sounds. I tried to help, but it's difficult to explain a natural reflex to someone. Edit. Just wanted to add that she kept laughing at herself and saying, "I don't remember how to cough." That's what? I mean, what? That has to be either fake on her part or a brain dysfunction. Surely? Coughing is a reflex FFS. 3 months into our freshman year of college, a friend of mine developed a rash. I suggested he look into hypoallergenic sheets and swap out his others. His response, "I've used the same sheets since we moved in. It's not the sheets." Mind you, not the same of sheets, but the same exact sheets unchanged and slept/eaten upon/etc. for 3 months. My best friend also had this problem. No one told her that she needed to wash her blankets like you wash your clothes, and for many years, I was the only one to explain this to her. She would just layer new blankets over the older blankets and didn't understand why her acne was so bad growing up. Once she started regularly washing her blankets, her skin cleared up, but she'll still swear it was all because of a face scrub she got at Rite Aid. This isn't just one person, but I've come to the realization that many adults no longer have the ability to read a map or follow simple driving directions to a new place, as they are completely reliant on GPS telling them when and where to turn. Two instances that stand out. A person in my office building was standing at the door asking everyone coming and going if they'd seen a car mount GPS unit in the parking lot, as they'd lost it bringing it in somehow. They were sobbing, so I figured it must be an expensive model. I asked what it was, but it was cheap, and helped them look around under cars to see if we could find it, during which we talked. They were crying over the price of losing it. They were crying because they didn't know how they'd get home that night without it. Couldn't drive home from their job they'd worked at for months with a GPS telling them how. I was out with a friend doing some shopping in a part of a city we'd never been to before. We were in the parking lot of store A and wanted to get to store B, which we could see, but there wasn't a connected road between the two. Friend punches in the store on their iPhone to get directions, and it gives of a 30-minute route that includes 2 toll roads. I thought there was no way it should take that much driving to get there, so I looked Google Maps and saw we could drive it in about 3 minutes by going 2 stores over and exiting from the back of that store's parking lot onto the road that leads to store B. They could not look at the map and then translate it to the real world. Despite that, we could literally see all the features we needed to follow. He ended up taking the 30 minutes route and paying the tolls because he didn't trust the map. I've seen a lot of other experiences similar to this, but those other two that always stand out to me. Holy cheese, this is horrifying. I always wondered if and then the sat nav directed them into a lake, so into the lake they went stories were fake, but now I'm not so sure. I mean, after just doing a journey once, surely most people have at least fleeting memories of landmarks and rough directions with which they could largely get by. Reading this thread made me realize my parents have done an amazing job preparing me for adult life. I need to go thank them now. I watched a mom teaching her child how to use the cappuccino machine yesterday, mainly making sure he stopped before it was actually full, since it keeps going after. I was like, yes, teach that child how to function in the real world. I saw a list before of all the things you teach your child before 18. Some of them had never even occurred to me. I had to jump a friend's car that wouldn't start. It had a hard time, but I finally got it running. She immediately turns off the car and says, "Thanks so much, I'll call you later." Oh man, I had a friend who was really upset because his car kept dying and he kept having to jump it. We talked for a bit and I offered to jump it so at least he could go to the mechanic. We go to his car and I help him jump it, and he turns it off and says thanks. I'm just gonna go eat real quick and then I'll go. I then have to explain to the poor boy that we'd have to jump his car again, but at least he probably doesn't need to go to a mechanic, lol. Oh gosh, I have a few from when I first went to university, living in halls and realizing some people literally did not know how to cook a thing. There was one girl who bought chicken and kept it in the cupboard, despite being told by pretty much everyone else in the flat that it was meant to go in the fridge or freezer. Flat out refused to listen, kept putting it in the cupboard. Don't know how she didn't get sick. Another flatmate who didn't eat potato for almost a year because he didn't know how to peel them and didn't want to try. I tried to teach him. Then he realized he could buy pre-prepared. One guy who decided to take a nap whilst cooking sausages for dinner just left them in the grill and only woke up when the fire alarms were going off and the whole building was being evacuated. Finally, two girls who again almost caused a fire if I hadn't found them. These two were actually my friends and I was looking for them. Found them in one of the kitchens about to cook a stir fry. They had a wok with about an inch depth of oil in the bottom, shimmering because it was so hot, and they weren't sure if it was hot enough to cook with yet. They were really glad I found them because they couldn't tell that it was boiling oil and were worried the food wouldn't cook. I was really glad I found them, because if they had thrown their stir-fry veg in there it would have probably caused a fire, or at least spat boiling oil all over them. I turned it off and tossed one piece of veg in there, turned black almost instantly. Honestly, I was just shocked and appalled that so many 18-year-olds had never cooked for themselves before, and even worse, that their parents had sent them off to fend for themselves not having taught them. It's actually scary thinking back. Oh god, an old roommate, this was after college, mind you, used to keep his chicken in the toaster oven. He had already cooked it, but didn't realize you can't just leave an entire cooked chicken in the toaster oven for 2 days and still eat it. Yelled at me when I threw it out. Also yelled at me for just reheating the water in my teapot from earlier in the day instead of putting in new water every time, because I would be concentrating the chemicals, and it was unhealthy. I walked in on him masturbating in our living room once. The image will never leave me. What a roommate. In my early 20s I was really poor. I lived across from a Dollar General and would frequent it for odds and ends, frequently. There was a 18 to 22 year old girl who worked the cash register who I assumed was on the spectrum of sorts. She couldn't make eye contact, was very obviously socially awkward. She was also often very dirty and always smelled of beau. It was always weird to me because they sold deodorant. She also had one hand that was much smaller and less mobile than the other. I was always kind to her, despite her being the slowest on the cash register, part to her physical speed capabilities, part to her painful customer interactions. She constantly overshared, uncomfortably. It was what it was. It didn't bother me. I honestly felt bad for the girl, and would occasionally see bruises on her smaller hand/arm, and wondered if she was abused. One day I walked into the good old EG, looking to pick up some cleaning supplies and shampoo, and saw they had a clothing sale. Before you judge, I was poor, and they didn't have the worst clothing. The sale was that certain color stickered items were $1. I browsed and actually found 5 things that weren't too terrible: some pajamas, some leggings, a piece of athletic wear. I brought up all my items, waited for a while as the girl was at the register, and brought up my 5 $1 clothing items, a spray cleaner, and a bottle of shampoo, both of which were also $1. She scanned them in and said $53. I kind of anticipated this, so I pointed to the literal 3 signs about the sale right around the register. There must have been 25 signs through the small store. I wasn't angry. She looked at me, and I explained the sticker color matches the sale, and they need to be discounted. She thinks for a good long while, looking at the register, clearly in pain, and not knowing what to do. Eventually, she scans the 7 items again, hits a bunch of buttons, then says, "Okay, $24. I was absolutely flabbergasted. I knew she was slower, but discovering that she couldn't figure out 5 plus 2 should be 7, and tax, absolutely shocked me and truly bummed me out. Myself and the customer behind me just stared, not knowing what to do for far too long. I eventually asked if there was anyone else working who could help. She used the store phone to call in another coworker back in from their break. I stopped seeing her after a while, which was to be expected. I think of her often. I hope she's okay. I had a cashier once who couldn't understand me either. I wanted this shirt in this size, but it didn't have a tag, so I brought up this same shirt in a different size, so you can scan it. Cashier scans the one shirt 2 times and tells me my total. No, I only wanted this one, but it didn't have a tag. Cashier scans the other shirt and then takes away the one without the tag. Vertical bar. It took quite a bit of repeating myself before she understood. I felt like a real Karen, but I literally could not explain the situation any differently. This is in part due to being rich enough to be out of touch, and in part a general lack of general adult skills. In college, I had a friend named Mally. She was a couple years younger than the rest of the people in our group and still lived at home with her parents due to their very strict culture and beliefs about how an unmarried woman should not live away from home. But her dad was a doctor and also had family money, so they were quite wealthy for our area. The sort of wealthy where for her 16th birthday, they bought her a Porsche, and when they didn't think she thanked them adequately for it, they returned it. Anyway, I remember when the group of us were at some of the guys on campus apartment, their toilet clogged. Mally, without really blinking, said we should call our plumber to get it fixed. Of course the guys were like, no, it's just clogged. Why would we call a plumber? To which Mally, who was very confused, replied, because that's what plumbers do. Why would you do it yourself? So we then explained first how expensive plumbers are, and second, how the average person does not call a plumber for a slightly clogged toilet. Mally was confused and then asked, well, what do you do when a light bulb burns out? Change it yourself? And obviously, we were all nodding and saying yeah, absolutely. So that was when we discovered just how sheltered and out of touch Mally was with how normal people do things. We specifically learned that she didn't know how to do laundry, change a light bulb, plunge a toilet, cook literally anything, put gas in her car, all because either their maids did it for her. Also worth noting, having maids is extremely rare in our area, or her dad did. It blew her mind when we explained that those are very normal things to know how to do, and ended up showing her how to do all those things. She really hated it, but it did a lot to make her a more self-reliant adult. Her parents really sheltered her so much, so it wasn't totally her fault. Edit. Also, just to be clear, my friend is a very sweet, intelligent, and lovely woman. At her core, she is amazing. But just the way her parents raised her and kept her sheltered is where these issues came from. She is doing very well for herself right now and has learned and a lot and has generally been very open to it. At the time of these stories, it was still very near the beginning of her having any semblance of freedom. So these examples come from literal first opportunities to show her what skills many adults have. I hope I haven't painted her in too bad of a light, because she really is a sweet girl and has worked hard to open her horizons. Now that she even knows what horizons are out there. We have toilets with very powerful flushes and they have literally never clogged in the nearly 10 years since we bought the house. My children probably have no idea how to plunge a toilet. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I will put this on my list. Maybe I'm late into this, but my GF's grandfather had started to be, let's say, less accurate when peeing standing and leaving a mess in the washroom. I suggested that there's nothing wrong with sitting down for peeing, and that would make life easier for everybody. All her family stared at me like in shock. True, my GF and her family didn't know that males can pee while sitting. Everybody in that family thought that as a male, the only physical way to pee is standing. I was almost asked to demonstrate in front of them that it's possible. Edit. Spelling. Do they stand up to pee when they take a chiss? So some background info. My dad is a mechanic, so I've been very lucky to have the importance of vehicle maintenance drilled into my head from a young age. When my now fiance and I were dating for about 6 months, I needed to change the oil in my car, so I asked when the last time she had changed her oil. She had never changed it after owning the car for 3 years. I immediately brought it to my dad's place as I wasn't sure what to expect. We decided to add oil to properly flush it once we changed the oil a week later. It took 5 quarts of oil and the engine only holds 4 quarts total. Car still runs 2 years of regular oil changes later. To paraphrase my dad, it speaks to the quality of Kia/Hyundai engines, since most cars would have seized up given how low it was for so long. My father-in-law, who was an engineer, didn't believe in preventative maintenance including oil changes. Sole reason we drive Hondas is because of the quality of their engines. His last Honda never had an oil change in the 10+ years he owned it, and still ran when they sold it because he couldn't drive anymore. Okay, this is not quite a whilst adulting, but for as long as I can remember, my father had red eyes after showering. I didn't even think about it. One day as a teenager, a friend slept over, and in the morning she saw my dad dressed and ready for work, freshly showered, red-eyed. She asked him why his eyes were red, and he simply said shampoo. She then very carefully and as respectfully as she could muster asked him why he didn't close his eyes, and he laughed and said, "What do you think? I'm an idiot? Closing my eyes in the shower? Sheesh." My dad did a lot of things that embarrassed me, but that one was pretty high up there. Edit. To everyone saying he was getting high, you have no idea how badly I wish that was the case. I don't understand his logic there. Why wouldn't he close his eyes? In 3rd semester of software engineering, and quite a few in my class didn't know CTRL plus C. CTRL plus V, CTRL plus F and a lot of other very basic computer stuff. Blew my mind. Half a semester of online classes, assignments, and exams later, everyone knows this chiz now. I became the go-to computer person in one of my classes when I told my professor to do CTRL plus SHIFT plus T to reopen a tab she accidentally closed. She thanked me at the end for helping with the lecture, but that was literally all I did. This is kinda gross. One of my EXS roommate at uni started complaining his penis hurt. So they asked if the underneath was sore, and he said no, it's just like round the end. So they asked if he'd peeled back his foreskin to look. He looked at them blankly. So they said, you know, like when you wash under it? Blank look. You do wash under your foreskin, right? He did not. Because no one had ever told him to. He was 21. As a nurse aide, I can tell you that I have seen men in their 80s who have never cleaned under their foreskin. In a related story, I had a patient with an inverted penis, which is somewhat common in morbidly obese men. The root of the penis stays in place, no matter how big you are, so you can have your abdominal fat extend some distance beyond the tip, so that your outie becomes an innie. This poor man was absolutely unable to clean himself, so I had to reach in the innie and with a gloved hand remove all of the gunk from the head of his penis. It felt like dry paper mash. He said he felt a lot better after, though. Edit. Holy chiz, you guys. My first award. Thank you. I work graveyard shift, and I had to explain to a coworker that at midnight, 12 am/0000 hours, it is the start of a new day. She then had an anxiety attack, because I was telling her that today is not Monday anymore. Today is Tuesday now. I had a drawn out conversation with my supervisor about this in the opposite direction. Schedule said 12 to 4 am on Tuesday. I show up Tuesday morning and no one is ducking there. Turns out he meant show up at midnight Tuesday night to actually work 12 to 4 am Wednesday. He did not get the difference, even when I focused in on the 4 am part only. Turns out the two other ladies hanging tags were old hat and just knew he did it wrong and to come on Wednesday. No, I did not question our change day. I worked in the pharmacy previously, and getting suckered into hanging tags at all was a long story. The worst part is the schedule was not handwritten or anything. He had to use the software that would have easily shown the 6 am starts on Tuesday being right after our 4 am end quote unquote on Wednesday. My housemate, 24-year-old post-grad student, not realizing that 1. You needed to preheat an oven. 2. You needed to defrost frozen meat before cooking it. 3. You need to use a baking tray. After I caught her lining the bottom of our oven with frozen chicken drumsticks. You needed to preheat an oven. Not if I just add a few minutes. I'm not making 3 trips to the kitchen for 1 toaster oven full of pizza rolls. My coworker, my laptop dies every weekend and has no charge on Monday morning, even though it is always plugged in. I shut it down every Friday night and then turn off the power strip. It has to be broken. Give me a new one. Me, /checking system info / this computer hasn't been rebooted in 36 hours. You left it on all weekend with the power strip off, so that is why the battery died. My coworker, I don't think that's right. Me, /facet-esque / I had a relative try to put her son on the school bus his first day of kindergarten and got upset when the driver refused to let him on because he wasn't on the list. She never registered him for school and just thought she could put him on the bus and send him. Somehow, of all the absurd things I have read here till now, this is the one that gets me. This is being oblivious of the real world at another level. This is like 10 years ago. I was dating a 32-year-old, and he asked me if I wanted to get together to watch a TV show. I said sure. What time is it on? He looks it up and says to me 8 Pacific 9 Central. I asked what was confusing him, and he told me he wasn't sure if the show was on at 8 or 9. My man did not know what time zone we lived in. So I was like, okay, well, you know what ocean we're near, right? Cause I was trying to get him to think about the Pacific time zone in terms of the giant body of water for which it was named, and he immediately got defensive and for real said, why would I know that? I'm from Texas. He'd been living in San Francisco for 5 years and could see the Pacific Ocean out his window. My girlfriend refuses to accept how STDs work and believes they randomly appear out of nowhere, and even when I tell her they spread from person to person, she says, "That's not possible. Where did the first person get it?" So I explain it in detail and she just goes, "You're only making me feel stupid. You always do this," and then doesn't talk to me for ages. TL. Dr. My GF refuses to accept scientific fact about STDs and then blames me for making her feel stupid. You should probably get tested if you haven't already. My exie didn't know how to hold a fork properly. All utensils were used by grasping it in a fist. Also didn't know how to open up baby wipes. He tore open the bag. It has a lid so they don't dry out. He ignored the lid. Didn't know how to merge or change lanes. He wouldn't check blind spots or accelerate. Would actually frequently slow down and turn into cars. I attribute his lack of accidents to other safe drivers on the road. He would, instead, use a blinker when backing out of parking spaces, so people knew which way he was backing out at. Didn't know to rinse vegetables or fruits before eating. Basic chis. Like how? Don't get me started on any food prep. I often felt like a parent more than a partner, and it got old. Constantly having to teach him things he was never told or taught. He would, instead, use a blinker when backing out of parking spaces, so people knew which way he was backing out at. You're actually supposed to do that in my state, but nobody actually does it except for the students, who get penalized when on their driving test because they didn't do it, because nobody ducking does it. You know, when they said wear a face mask, make it cover both your mouth and nose, don't touch it, wash your hands and stay home. Yeah, simple instructions, and a whole load of people can't follow them properly. That is messed up. I literally saw a picture of a guy that had taken off his latex gloves with his mouth to play with his phone whilst waiting in a queue. Grown woman telling me it's easier to do one big wipe from a to vag instead of wiping vag first then a last. Well, guess we finally found out why she suffers from multiple uses a month. I'm not even a woman and that is abhorrent. Holy duck. Someone told me that their husband would put shampoo in their hair and not rinse after applying. The husband for his entire life wondered why his hair was always greasy. I can't imagine not rinsing the shampoo out. I can't stand when my hair feels greasy. I bet he felt magical when he finally learned this and, hopefully, had actually clean hair. I had spent the night at my ex-boyfriend's place and stayed a bit longer in the morning to help clean the house. I was folding some clothes when I noticed him go from one side of the bed to another without actually doing anything. I looked at him and he looked clueless. He said, "Can you please make the bed?" I've never done this, no idea where to start. I didn't mean to have a strong reaction to it, but man did it leave me speechless. He was 26 at the time. That day I realized his mother often visited his house to make the bed and clean. Yeah. His mother prepped your sex bed. I asked my husband to make some herbal tea for me the first year we were married. I walked into the kitchen to find him standing over the stove with a mug of water sitting directly on the burner. Poor baby. Girl I went to HS with, why do people say a quarter of an hour? Like what does that even mean? Me, it's 15 minutes. Because 15 is a fourth of 60, so that's a quarter of an hour. Her looking at me like I'm a ducking idiot, but a quarter is 25. Me, I was reading off measurements to a guy at work. Checked his notes when finished. Came upon 3/25. 3/4. Ugh. This is gonna get buried but duck it. I have a buddy who I'm still good friends with but has some personal issues. Not like severe mental problems, just an extreme lack of motivation. He dropped out of college. He lives at home and he's never had a job for more than a few weeks. In his defense, the dude is one of the most shy people I have ever met in my life. So he deserves some empathy for his inability to work. Anyways, a couple years ago me and my roommate were planning a kickback for us and some friends with bonfire, beer, BBQ, weed, the whole 9 yards. Initially we had planned on picking up our friend, but he didn't call us in time, so we ended up just going home and starting drinking. Around 11 PM or so our friend calls us and apologizes for his lateness. We're all like, it's cool, but we can't come get you because drinking, so we suggest he gets an Uber. He says he's never heard of Uber, and we explain it's like a taxi. He's baffled but downloads the app. Sometime peas, and he texts us in confusion that the app wanted his debit card information, to which we reply something along the lines of, well yeah, it's a ride sharing app, of course it costs money. He's outraged that they would charge him for such a short ride, and did not understand when we tried about a dozen times to explain that ride sharing drivers deserve pay. He didn't end up getting an Uber, even after we agreed to pay for it. It was $12, and he just bows out at this point. Super weird because he was like 22 at the time, but could not be convinced to take a ducking Uber. Blew me away. He's never had a job for more than a few weeks, did not understand that ride sharing drivers deserve pay, is money is just an abstract concept to him. When I first met my ex, he didn't know how to cook. 40-something-year-old at the time I met him. He only knew how to use a microwave, and the best thing he thought of cooking was chicken thighs. Chicken thighs cooked in the microwave. Everything was cooked in the microwave. Wet, soggy, colorless flesh with no flavoring. That's not how it works. That's not how any cooking should be done. Edit. Let me add that the microwave sometimes doesn't cook things evenly, so some of the thighs were raw on the inside. I was tending bar in LA when if the cocktail waitresses, an LA model type, asked me to burp her like a baby. I'm certain she wasn't flirting, since she was way out of my league, but I'm convinced she was just desperate for attention. She told me she never learned how to burp, like that was a normal thing to not know. She must have read the revulsion on my face, because as she turned to leave she let out this deep belly burp that filled the bar. She turned beet red as I called out, "You're welcome." As someone who also cannot burp, it's a really awful thing. People have tried to explain it to me over the years. Just suck in air and, let it burp out. Pretend you're trying to vomit, but don't. When I get stomach gas, the only direction that pressure is going is award. I stopped drinking anything carbonated because the bloating is so painful. We were out for a company lunch at a sports bar, and one of my co-workers discreetly told me that she had pulled pork stuck in her teeth. I always keep a thing of floss in my purse, so I offered to let her have it. She gratefully accepted and then asked, "How do I use it?" She had never flossed in her life. She hadn't even had her teeth flossed at the dentist. So I took this 40-year-old woman to the ladies' room and taught her how to floss. The icing on the cake is that she's English, so I teased her about perpetuating stereotypes. If you're reading this, Viv, I love you. Didn't know how to wipe his so he always had dingleberries. Safe to say it was a turn-off. I'm now happily married to someone with better butt hygiene. That's not a turn-off, that's a massive deal breaker. Christ. A girl my cousin and his GF set me up with. Things were actually alright. We connected via similar hobbies and interest. Then about 3-ish weeks after we met, I ran over to her place for reasons and made a joke about how her laundry basket looked like it was about to explode. To which she responds, "Oh, my mom comes by on Tuesdays and does my laundry." Fast forward a bit, and I learned that she at 25 didn't know how to do laundry, cook, clean, beyond moving stuff, take out trash, how the dishwasher in her apartment worked, or actually pay her own bills. It was all taken care of by her parents. They would come by every couple of days and do some laundry, dishes, etc, and she would just occupy space in the area, I guess. I did try and teach her some basic things, but it was a constant battle of, "But my parents will do it for me," or "That's what Uber Eats is for," or various replies like that. I eventually had enough of it and told her I'm done unless she can learn to do well everything her parents do for herself. Cousin and his GF had no idea the girl was like that. Work friend of his GF BTW, and didn't believe me for a while till the GF went to this girl's place to drop something off, and there was the girl's mom doing laundry and making breakfast. And I did have a few run-in with her parents, seemingly glad I was there to help look after and take care of her. "So, you were a new babysitter, not a partner? Glad you left." I've got two. A girl I knew in college. Her dad called once to remind her that every so often she needed to put oil in her truck. She did. Then her truck started smelling like French fries and then died. Even after trying to explain it, she couldn't understand that this was directly related to the quart of vegetable oil she put in the motor. Another time, another party back in college, a guy demonstrated how to shotgun a beer by shoving a steak knife into it and twisting it. Also some of his hand. He panicked like crazy, made all kinds of noises, and waved his hand around freaking out and getting blood all over. He was a bit drunk, though, and these things happen. He got a bandage on it a minute later, and he was fine. My ex was 25 and didn't know how to write a check, or how a dishwasher worked, or how to keep his rick in his pants. Edit. We live in a rural Midwestern area. Many bills and utilities don't even do online payments, so you have to mail in a check. Oh, you know my ex. Lol. Was making dinner with my ex and her mom. They were talking about how they forgot to put on a can of corn to go with the meal, but that's okay, they can just microwave it, right? First it took 2 of them to use the can opener, as in they took turns because the cans are so strong. Look over and they have the can cut almost all the way around. But not around the lid, it's this weird, wavy, up and down the side of the can way. Basically took the last 1/5 of the can right off. I stare at them, but don't say anything because, hey, not my house. They've gotten this far, why point it out now and go back to what I'm doing? Moments later they congratulate themselves and move on to the next step, which apparently to both of them was just sticking the can straight in the microwave. Seconds later lots of bright flashes, both of them leap away the microwave, so I have to come around the table and do the so heroic task of hitting the open button and stop the potential meltdown. The rest of the dinner was them so shocked that metal reacts like that in a microwave. Yes, even forks or spoons would do that, and how amazed they were it's never happened before. Flash forward a year and they're buying a new microwave. Turns out they've bought all their microwaves from this one store and the owner was surprised it's been so long. Turns out, has a great guy, always helps them find the best deals, and even jokes about how the extended warranty is for suckers. If nothing else, this post has made me realize I'm not nearly as useless as I thought I was. Not really the same but kinda fits. Had a friend complain the movie they were watching didn't tell you who won the war. It was a WWI movie. Edit. In her defense I'm not sure she knew it was a WWI movie, but I still found it pretty funny. That's because no one won. 1. Training a new girl at work, and she told me she didn't know how to sweep. I had to show her. 2. Training a new girl at work. Her dishes often still greasy after being washed. I asked her about it, and I asked her when she puts the soap on and she replied, straight-faced, "Oh, you use soap here." We had raw meat on many of those dishes. 3. My ex told me he thought mixing dark and light loads of laundry was a myth after destroying a bunch of my clothes. He also told me soaking dishes had no effect. NGL I never separate lights/darks and I've never had a problem, lol. Friend of mine didn't know that when the white taillights on a car light up, that means they're in reverse. He was 21. Also didn't know if you had to stop at a red light if you wanted to make a right turn. He thought you just rolled through like a yield. I think 95% of Americans think right on red is basically yield. In my honors dorm at Purdue there was a computer science major named Jeffrey. He was well known because his parents would stop by every week to pick up his laundry and bring him a case of Fiji water with expensive groceries. His dad was a doctor. We commented on Jeffrey's long gross toenails and how he needs to cut them. He told us they are long because his mom hasn't visited in weeks and she was the one who cut them. His mother cut her 19-year-old son's toenails. Disgusting. We had to give him a lesson on it. Thought you were going to say his mom never taught him, so he just lets them grow out indefinitely. How naive I was. That is so much worse. Not long after I got my driver's license, I drove my aunt to an appointment with her doctor. On the way, I got a flat tire and had no idea how to fix it. No one had ever explained how to jack or to get the lug nuts off. So, my aunt said, "You have no business driving a car if you can't change a tire." I dated a guy that would put conditioner first and then shampoo his hair. When I pointed out that it was the other way around he got really grumpy and said, "How is one supposed to know that?" I point to the instructions on the labels in the back. We never spoke about it again, but his hair got softer. I met my current boyfriend when we were 24 and he still lived it with his mum and dad as he never saw a need to move out while he was single. He had never really cooked food a day in his life unless it was microwaved. He wasn't a head about it. His mum just never allowed him or his siblings to cook, so he never learned. The first time he ever cooked me dinner, after me asking lots, it was chili out of a can which wasn't so bad. I'm not a fussy snobby person. The rice though. The rice was still hard. He cooked it out the packet, and he got the timing wrong, and he didn't even test it first. Bless him. I wasn't bothered by it. We live together now, and I've taught him how to cook basic things, but I still do the larger majority of the cooking during the week. On Saturdays when my son goes to his dad's for the weekend, he treats me to a home-cooked steak dinner, which has gotten really good at cooking. It's literally only the cooking thing though. I think his mum held him back from doing a lot of things independently because he got excited at using the washing machine for the first time. Mothering your kids is fine, but at least teach them basic life skills. My BF is really good with DIY and computers though, so I say that we balance each other out on the stuff each of us don't know. Oh my, you watched until the end? That's fucking awesome dude. Thanks for watching.